thought it was just a normal afternoon clearing out my mother's old cedar chest until I saw a photograph of myself taken from inside my own bedroom window. I didn't react because I've known for 30 years that someone was watching me back then. I've just never had the proof. And when my husband walked in and tried to hide that specific picture under a stack of mail, I realized one thing. The man I've shared a bed with for 3 decades wasn't just watching me. He was waiting. The house was too quiet that afternoon. Just the rhythmic hum of the dishwasher and the scent of old lavender as I sorted through the cedar chest. My daughter, Sarah, was sitting on the rug nearby, laughing at old Polaroids of her first birthday party. To her, it was just a sweet trip down memory lane, but I noticed a thin silver key taped to the back of a photo of our old garden, a key I had never seen before. It reminded me of that summer in 1994, the one where I felt like the shadows in our hallway were moving, the one where I never told anyone I found my jewelry rearranged every Tuesday. I had dismissed it as mom brain or exhaustion, but staring at that key, my skin went cold. I looked at the window in the photograph, then at the reflection of my husband, David, as he walked into the room with a tray of tea. He looked so normal, the same kind eyes, the same steady hands, but I noticed the way his thumb twitched when his eyes landed on that specific Polaroid. It was a detail nobody else would ever see, a micro-expression of pure, calculated panic. That's when I started wondering if the random break-in we had 30 years ago wasn't a stranger at all, but the man standing in front of me. If you want to see what happened next, stay with me. And if you like stories that reveal what people try to hide, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I was about to find out. At first, it was small, just the faint rhythmic tapping of David's wedding ring against the silver tea tray. A sound so domestic, so familiar, yet suddenly it sounded like a countdown. Then came the second sign. He didn't ask what I was looking at. Usually, David is the first to lean in, to reminisce, to point out a face in an old photo. But today, he stood perfectly still in the doorframe, his shadow stretching long across the Persian rug I'd bought for our 10th anniversary. I watched his reflection in the glass of a framed family portrait on the mantel. His eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on that tiny silver key resting in my palm. The mismatch in his reaction was chilling. A normal husband would ask, "Honey, where did that come from?" But David, he just started breathing. Heavy, deliberate breaths that seemed to suck the oxygen right out of the room. My daughter, Sarah, was still humming a tune, completely unaware of the atmosphere in the shifted. She reached for a cookie from the tray he held, her sleeve brushing against his arm, oblivious to the fact that her father's muscles were as rigid as stone. The environment remained stubbornly normal. The clock on the wall kept its steady, mocking tick, and the golden afternoon sun continued to dance on the floorboards. But I could see it clearly now. The man who had held my hand through childbirth and funerals was counting the steps between the doorway and where I sat. Something was wrong, and he knew it. He knew that the key in my hand didn't belong to a diary or a jewelry box. It was a skeleton key, the kind used for the heavy, dead-bolted doors in the basement of our first house, the house he claimed had been cleared out before we moved in. I felt a sudden, sharp pressure in my chest, a realization forming that made the room tilt. I remembered the intruder from 1994, the one the police never caught. I remembered how David was the one to find the broken window, the one who insisted we change every lock in the house, except for the ones he controlled. I looked up at him, forcing a smile that felt like breaking glass. I wanted to see if the mask would slip. He didn't smile back. Instead, he set the tray down with a clinical precision that made my blood run cold. He didn't look like a husband anymore. He looked like a predator who had just realized his prey had finally looked up. I gripped the key tighter, the metal biting into my skin. And that's when I noticed the final detail in the reflection behind him. The basement door, the one we kept locked for storage, was standing half an inch open. But that wasn't the worst part. The moment everything broke wasn't loud. It was the soft, metallic chime of that silver key hitting the floor as I let it slip through my trembling hands. The sound was tiny, yet it sliced through Sarah's humming like a razor. Suddenly, she turned. Her smile faltered as she looked from the key on the rug to the look on her father's face. Conversation slowed. Even the birds outside seemed to go quiet as the atmosphere in the room shifted from a cozy afternoon to a crime scene. David didn't move to pick it up. Instead, he did something far more terrifying. He stepped on it. He tried to maintain control, his voice dropping into that reasonable tone he used whenever I questioned him. "Honey, you're tired," he whispered, his hand reaching out to grip my shoulder with a strength that was meant to look like comfort, but felt like a warning. But for the first time in 30 years, his control failed. Sarah didn't move. She saw the way my breath was coming in short, shallow gasps. She saw the bruise-like grip he had on my arm. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling, "what is that key? Why are you acting like this?" David's mask didn't just slip. It disintegrated. The polite, retired suburban husband vanished, replaced by a cold, clinical stranger. He realized he wasn't just lying to me anymore. He was losing his daughter's respect, the one thing he valued more than his secrets. He leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear, and whispered the one thing I never thought I'd hear. "You should have left that chest closed, Eleanor. Some doors stay locked for a reason." But he didn't realize I had already called the one person who knew exactly what that key opened. That's when I realized something most people never learn until it's too late. Fear doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the moment someone familiar stops pretending. David straightened slowly, his foot still pinning the key to the floor. For a second, he tried to force that charming neighborhood favorite smile back onto his face, but it was hollow now. The realization didn't hit like lightning. It settled like dust, quiet and undeniable. I saw it clearly, not just the man I'd raised a family with, but the man who had stood in that hospital window in 1994, watching me struggle for breath while he held the very thing that would keep me silent for decades. Memories I thought were blank spaces began filling themselves in, not as images, but as sensations. The faint smell of that basement stamped concrete, the feeling of him standing over me while I was too sedated to speak, and the sound of him whispering, "It's better this way." He started talking then, his voice coming too fast. He said I was overthinking, that the key was just for an old storage unit he'd forgotten about, but his voice had lost its balance. The calm tone was now stretched thin like paper about to tear. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I simply reached for my phone on the side table. "I didn't just call a locksmith, David," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. "I called your sister, the one you told me passed away in 1994. The color drained from his face so fast, as if he'd seen a ghost, because he had. The loss of his sister was the tragedy that had bonded us together, the reason I had trusted him so blindly. But she wasn't dead. She was the one who had sent me that photograph 3 days ago, hidden in a plain manila envelope. To everyone else in our neighborhood, it was just a sudden, quiet divorce, the kind people whisper about over bridge games and never fully explain. But to me, it was the moment I learned that the past never really disappears. It just waits for the right light to show the cracks. I didn't need to expose his every sin to the world. Seeing him realize that I was no longer his quiet wife, but his judge and jury, was enough. I'd go through every second of that afternoon again, just to watch that look in his eyes, the look of a man finally understanding that a secret only survives as long as the person who knows it stays silent. And I'm not being silent anymore. People like David don't lose power when they're attacked. They lose it when they're seen. He wasn't the protector, he was the jailer. And in that quiet shift, I saw the moment control left him for good. He realized that 30 years of lies were unraveling because of one small, silver mistake. If you want to see what happened next, Stay with me. And if you like stories that reveal what people try to hide, don't forget to like and subscribe. I stood up, stepping past him toward the door, leaving the key and him exactly where they belonged, in the past.